Welcome to From the Nightmares of Danny, and this is chapter 3 of Feral Dolls. This project is gonna be as another commission. This is the 8th commission that I did in 2020, so the next chapter is gonna be the last one, and I will finally go back to my own original ideas. Anyways, for this project I'm going to use Monster High's 13 Wishes Spectre von der Geist, you know, the one that came with the music playset. I'm going to transform her into Salem from RWBY. Once again, I've never heard about this anime as well, so it's also new for me, just like the previous project. So I did a lot of research and collected tons of reference pictures and began working. Once everything was cleaned up, I began rerouting her head using alpaca hair as always. I haven't painted her head this time because it was already white to begin with. So let's talk a little bit about rerouting. I know that I've talked about needles in my first video, but here is another thing. Use only thin needles, not super thin to the point that it literally bends, but ones that are sturdy, strong, and at the same time thin. The one that I'm using is the borderline for me because I've tried a bit thicker one compared to these and it ended up cracking the doll's head, which is the last thing you want after hours of rerouting. If you want to have a more realistic looking hair part line, make sure to reroute both hair strands into one single plaque. Then fold one strand to the left and the other one to the right. Never use two individual plaques for both strands, because once you fold them you will end up with a gap between these two plaques, and like this you won't really do any annoying crossing. It takes way more time and ends up just looking very unrealistic. Then I began her face up and it was a bit of a struggle because the weather that day was very humid and I was on a rush. So I didn't really want it to wait a few days to let the MSC layers dry properly, so it ended up cracking and just being blurry. At that point I wasn't really able to continue painting, so I decided to wipe her face and repaint again. And this time I sprayed her head with MSC again and just let it dry for a week, just for a better result. The thing that I've changed from the original character was the mouth. You know, she's an anime character and they most of the time have line instead of a mouth for some reason. So I contacted my client and they said don't do anything, just leave it blank. So I decided to give her sharp teeth and red lipstick. I also painted the veins on her face and began defining them after every layer. I gave them shadows with pastels and painted the corners white to give it some deepness and texture. In order to blush her body, I removed her mermaid tail. and used nail buffers to sand her body. I blushed her body with pastels. As much as I love Spectra's transparent hands, for this project I had to cover them, so I used pen pastels titanium white as usual, and I blushed it for 3 layers and it fully covered everything. And I also painted the veins on her hands. I began her hairstyle by doing a ponytail first, then I used those stretchy threads and made braids out of them to create the single bun shape, but you really can do this with a tiny single sponge. I'm just overcomplicating this part for some reason. Once the circle shape was created, I took sections of her ponytail, tied them, cut the edge, used some super glue so that it won't get untied again. Then I fold them across the braids and repeat that step a few more times until it covers all the braided threads. Then I took some more alpaca and made braids to sort of imitate her baby hair. They were not braided in the reference picture, but I really wanted to make them look more detailed. Then it was time to make those, I don't even know what to call them, pigtails or stretched buns, I don't know. To be honest, I don't really like the shape that much, so I decided to change it a little bit, but at the same time to keep the same silhouette. So I took some alpaca hair and made even more braids. Then I folded them by half and glued their edges together. And to keep the folded part rounder, I just attached artificial pearls. And I also made more braids out of black acrylic yarn this time and sort of rolled them over the hair a few times and made 6 of them, and 4 out of 6 had longer black braids. Then I cut out some of my pins and glued them to the edge of the thing that we have just made for her hair, because I really don't know what to name them. Please help me with the name part in the comments. And attach them over the bun. Then I fixed her hair in place with a hairspray. Once you think you are done making braids, make some more, but this time out of white acrylic yarn. I chose white and not ivory, just like her hair cause I wanted them to pop a little bit. So I just glued them across her hairstyle and also made another braid out of ribbons. This time I feel like I've already annoyed you by saying braids, like how many times I said that. And to completely cover that braid ribbon, I attached this hair decoration. Then I attached her baby hairs and it was finally done. Now let's begin the dressmaking. I tried to make the pattern by tracing her original clothing, but I really wanted to make the dress fit fittingly because that's what we see in the reference picture. So in order for me to make the patterns, I took some kitchen wrap and wrapped her in it. Then I took some paper tape and rolled it all over her body. I marked where the seams will be, and I took my scissors and cut the pattern pieces out and traced them on paper. Then I cut out all the pattern pieces on fabric, and I'm using leather imitation. And I also glued this transparent fabric that had those sparkly rhinestones on. I could technically stitch them together, but it was just very flowy and it had this tendency to move around a lot. Her body spot on her cleavage had this guide-shaped cut, so I marked and cut it out on the pattern, then I traced it on her dress and cut it out again. Then to make the dress look even more fancy, I also added this shimmery sort of crimson colored fabric on the back. Then I hand stitched all the pieces together, marked and cut the sleeves a bit shorter. Then I machine stitched the edges. I also hand stitched the dress at some places, especially the waist and the knee area, to make it even more fitting and stretched. I tried to unfold the dress, but I decided to cut out the sleeves and reattach them again because after stitching I wasn't able to unfold them. I could make the dress one piece, but I really wanted to make the bottom part look more puffy, and I made it separately instead and attached it to her dress. Then I stitched this black lace to hide all the seams that connect these two pieces. To blend them together, I also added beads and scales on top. I'm not sure if the scales is the correct word for them, cause that's how we call them in my language, but if you know the correct term in English, please leave it in the comments. And I also added them to the edge of her skirt. I also took some lace, added to the edge of her sleeves and bodice. Then I tied her dress from the back using stretchy thread. And the amount of needles I broke while doing this was insane. I also painted the thread more saturated purple with markers. Then I began making her cape out of the same fabric. I sketched the texture that I was going to create on it and began bedazzling it with red rhinestones. Her cape had this specific shape, so I cut out the angles of it and continued to decorate them with rhinestones. And I also decorated it from the back, but this time just with black rhinestones and only the edges. I also added rhinestones on her chest. Then I did her nails with a glue gun and painted them black, and I made her shoes off camera and it was finally finished. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and share this video, and if you want to stay in touch with my content, subscribe and hit the bell icon. Now enjoy the end result pictures, and I will see you in chapter 4.